PVM perk for Ironman is not that different from main account PVM perks. The main difference is in endgame perks, where the amount of items that an Ironman need to obtain, then disassemble, is not feasible for many players. First, let's explain how this guide is going to work. Invention is something that is very different for each player, depending on each player's account progression. I will try my best to give a basic framework as well as basic guidance on what perks to go for and how to get them. But if you are at a point where you cannot fully achieve the perk, it is advisable for you to do a bit of your own research on RS.WIKI to understand other components that may give you the same or similar perks. One other thing that I'm going to assume going into this guide is that you will have a basic idea of how Invention works in terms of augmenting, gizmos, and perk creation. If you don't, there are multiple guides on Wiki as well as on YouTube, and if there's a demand in the comments, I can create one for you as well. Now, I am going to be splitting this guide up into pre and post Ancient Invention. At level 85 Archaeology, players will unlock Ancient Invention, and Ancient Invention will allow you access to new Ancient Invention components. These are the classic, the historic, vintage, and time-worn components. These will allow you to unlock new perks, as well as make some perk combinations a lot easier to obtain. But what really makes Ancient Invention good is that it increases the number of components that you can put onto a gizmo from 5 to 9. This massive increase gives a huge boost to the number of perks as well as the perk levels you can get. It is advisable to get Ancient Invention as soon as possible. Not only does Ancient Invention unlock many powerful perks, it also makes the pre-Ancient Invention perks completely redundant. In fact, I will even advise rushing Ancient Invention where possible and skipping normal invention entirely, with the exception of chucking a hone perk onto your mattock to speed up your archaeology grind. One other important thing to note is the existence of the invention calculator on the Runescape wiki. It allows you to input your level and different combinations to see which one will give you the highest probability of obtaining the perk you want. For example, let's say I want to get a combination of Impatient 3 and Devoted 2 on a single gizmo. I can play around with the combination to see that all Zamra components give me 16.87%, but if I put a single Zaros component, I can increase that success rate to 20.81%. I can also see that by using an extreme invention potion, I can boost that further to 27.72%. So this calculator will be very helpful for Ironmans to try to conserve as many resources as possible. If you play around with the calculator, you will see that your invention level will make a big difference to the perks you get. So that brings me on to the next 2 points, potions and level drains. Invention potion is a massive help to getting perks, and I would definitely recommend getting them. The ingredients are pretty easy to obtain and even can be considered lossless if you're using player-owned farm for farming training, which, as an FYI, you should be. The time you take to make the potion is definitely worth it compared to the time you would otherwise need to spend to get more items to disassemble for components. And in regards to level drains, in some cases a lower invention level is more beneficial than a higher one. This is an interesting mechanic of invention due to the way the game looks at what perks are beneficial and what perks correspond to which level. For example, it is impossible to get Biting 2 without a Cautious perk at a higher level, which is not ideal for most people, as most people do not want Cautious. But if we lower our invention level to 68, we can see there is now a 9.577% chance to get Biting 2 all by itself. Lowering your invention level is easiest done at the entrance of God Wars Dungeons 1. Here, the surrounding snow will drain your levels gradually. All you have to do is stand here until your invention level is lowered to the point where you want it to be. We now move on to the main section of the guide, pre-Ancient Invention. In this section, we're really looking at some very cheap, very basic perks to tide us over until we move on to Ancient Invention. It is not worth investing too heavily in these perks, as you will need to redo them once you get to Ancient Invention, so avoid using any rare or hard to get components. Let's first talk about weapons. The two key weapon perks you will want is Precise and Equilibrium. you can get both by putting 5 precise components into your weapon gizmo. Precise increases your minimum damage by 1.5% per rank. Equilibrium increases your minimum damage by 3% but lowers your max hit by 1%, which is an overall net increase in damage. It is also very useful in situations where you're hitting damage cap, for example when you're using Death Swiftness or Sunshine. At this point, you will want to get rank 3 or 4 of Precise and rank 2 of Equilibrium. Since Precise components give both Precise and Equilibrium, you are likely to get a combination of both in one single gizmo. It doesn't matter as long as you have a gizmo or 2 gizmos with rank 3 to 4 of Precise and rank 2 of Equilibrium. It does not matter whether they're in the same gizmo or separate. Precise components are unlocked at level 1 Invention, so you could get these perks at pretty much any level. Obviously, the higher your level, the better chance you are to get the higher perks. At level 10, you have a fairly decent chance of getting Precise 2, 22%, and Equilibrium 1, 18%. From level 20 onwards, you will start seeing Equilibrium 2, which is roughly 12% chance to get at exact level 20. From level 50 onwards, you should start seeing Precise 3, which has a roughly 10% chance at level 50. As you go even higher, you will start seeing Precise 4, but it is not really worth going for Precise 4 at this stage using just Precise components. Perks do not stack, so any overlapping perks will just use the highest rank of that perk currently on your gear. For example, if you have a gizmo with Precise 4 and Equilibrium 1, and a second gizmo with Equilibrium 2 by itself, the overlapping perk, that is Equilibrium, in this case the game will act as if you have Precise 4 and Equilibrium 2, completely ignoring the extra Equilibrium 1 that is overlapped. Now, as I mentioned before, you don't want to invest too heavily in pre-ancient invention perks. I would recommend just getting the weapon perks and stopping here. Don't bother with armor perks since the weapon perks makes the biggest difference to your damage. However, if you do have some spare components, I would advise looking at the below 2 perks. Again, there are many other armor perk options, but I do not think they're worth the time and components invested at this stage of your gameplay. The first perk we want to look at is Biting. Biting increases your chance of criticals by 2% per rank. This is definitely one of the strongest damage boosting armor perks. You can get Biting fairly easily through direct components. If you have a lot of spare direct components, you can attempt to get Biting 1 or 2 at this stage. Keyword being spare. From my experience, a lot of Ironman will have trouble with direct components in general. Also, direct components will have a use later on, so be fairly sparing if you do have spare components. Direct component is one of the weird ones where the component is also associated with a bunch of other really terrible perks. So to get Biting 2, being a lower level is actually an advantage. Getting Biting 2 from a combination of 5 direct components is fairly easy between level 20 and 60, where you will have around a 30% chance of getting Biting 2. The highest chance is around level 35, where you will have a whopping 44% chance. Now, as I mentioned in the previous section, with lowering your level, obviously you can get Biting 2 at a higher level, but it will come with Cautious, which for most players is not an ideal situation because it does not allow you to auto-retaliate. The second perk we want to look at is Crackling. While it's not the weakest armor perks available, it is one of the weakest out of the perks that is currently being used in the meta. So, why am I recommending it here? 2 reasons. 1, it is fairly easy to get a high rank of this perk, rank 3. 2, the component to make it isn't terribly hard to obtain. The component you need is Explosive. Explosive can be obtained from hand cannons dropped by dwarf hand cannoneers in the Chaos Dwarf battlefield. For anyone who have worked on getting a dragon pickaxe, you should have an overabundance of hand cannons to disassemble. You also do not need to be too conservative as explosive components will have limited use once you have unlocked Ancient Invention. The explosive component unlocks at level 49, but if you put all 5 explosive components into your gizmo, you have 0% chance to get Crackling. Instead, you should use this combination with 4 explosives and 1 magic component, which gives you 8% chance of receiving Crackling 3. Right, so we are now done with normal invention. Time to pick the big boy pants on and go into Ancient Invention. As we did with normal invention, let's start by talking about weapon gizmos and weapon perks. There are 3 main invention perks to consider here: precise equilibrium, which we discussed in the previous section, and also aftershock. At max rank, the strongest to weakest perk is precise, followed by equilibrium, with aftershock last. Now, if you do a bit of research, you will find aftershock is on all the best in-slot invention perk setup. This is not because aftershock is the strongest perk, rather it can be comboed with equilibrium, and a combination of aftershock plus equilibrium is stronger than equilibrium by itself. However, getting this combination is rather unfeasible for Ironman. A rough back of the envelope calculation shows that you need an average of 11 Dragon Rider lances per style to fully perk out your gear with aftershock. For this reason, I will be omitting of aftershock in this guide. If you are interested in the optimal best in slot perks and how to achieve it as an Ironman, please leave it in the comments below and I'll make a follow-up guide to discuss aftershock and some other perks that may be too difficult to obtain at this stage in time. With Ancient Invention, you will be able to access rank 6 of Precise and rank 4 of Equilibrium. To get rank 6 of Precise, you will need 9 historic components. You can get Precise 6 fairly easily with this combination starting from level 85, where you will have a chance of around 10%. To get rank 4 of Equilibrium, you will need 8 Time Worn components. You should be able to get this very easily. Even at level 30 Invention, you will have a 26% chance to get Equilibrium 4 and over 90% chance after level 80. Both historic and Time Worn components can be gotten from disassembling archaeology artifacts. With historic from artifacts that require less than 70 archaeology, and Time Worn from artifacts that require more than level 970. The amount of Time Worn components you receive from disassembling artifacts is tiered, with the artifacts above level 101 giving the most components per disassemble. While we are talking about equilibrium, there is another somewhat minor but decent perk you can get from Time Worn components. That is Ruthless. Ruthless increases your damage whenever an enemy is killed, up to 7.5% damage boost at 5 stacks. This is not too useful for bossing, as the scenario where you trigger it is fairly small in bossing situations, but this is quite a huge perk for Slayer. With the same combination of Equilibrium 4, 8 times Swarm, it is possible to get max rank of Equilibrium and max rank 3 Ruthless on the same gizmo. For your Slayer weapons, this is something you do want to go for. The only issue, of course, is that this combination is fairly rare. At level 120, the chance to get Equilibrium 4 and Ruthless on the same gizmo is only 1.2%. This can be increased to 5.2% with an Extreme Invention potion. My recommendation is to get these for your Slayer weapon, but I wouldn't worry too much about it if you're using your weapons just for bossing. Now, let's move on to armor perks. For armor perks, there will be 4 gizmos I'll be talking about. First, the gizmo, it will include Impatient. Impatient perk gives you a chance to have a 3% more adrenaline when using basic abilities. There are a few different ways to make Impatient 4. The most common is with 6 Zaro components and 1 Zamra component. If you are someone who's farmed down necks and have a lot of leftover next armor, that is Torva, Pernix, etc., that you can disassemble for Zero's components, this will be the easiest method. You will obtain a 94% chance of getting this perk at level 120 with extreme potions. And for those with slightly lower invention levels, you can still get over 80% chance as long as your level is above 95. For those who do not have easily accessible Zero's components on hand, the second option is to use the combination with 7 Zamrak and 1 Zero's component. To easily get Zamrak components, you can do Mionia farming. I won't go through the details here, but there's a few different guides on YouTube if you search for it. This combination will yield around 94% success rate at level 120 Invention with Extreme Invention potions, and over 80% success rate once you're above level 100 Invention. Of course, this combination still requires you to have a small amount of Zaros components. If you have absolutely zero Zaros components, the final option is to make use of a combination of Zamrak and Saradomi components. Both you will get from Mionia farming I have mentioned above. 7 Zamrak and 2 Sarah components gives you roughly 50% success chance at level 120 with Extreme Potion. This is one of the perks where having a lower level may be beneficial. At level 70, this combination will give you a 46% chance of obtaining Invention 4. The second gizmo I would like to talk about is one that will contain Enhanced Devoted. Enhanced perks just means that you cannot make combination gizmos where you have multiple perks in the same gizmo. This makes Enhanced Devoted slightly easier to talk about. To get Enhanced Devoted, you will need faceted components. Faceted components can be easily gotten on Ironman through disassembling crystal flasks. At level 120 with Extreme Invention Potion, you have a 72% chance to get Enhanced Devoted. This percentage drops to around 50% at around level 110, so this is definitely one where you want an as high invention level as possible before trying to obtain this perk. The third gizmo I want to discuss is one that will contain Crackling/Relentless. I talked about Crackling in the pre-Ancient Invention section. Now we're going to combine it with a new perk called Relentless. Relentless gives a percentage chance for Adrenaline not to be used when using Threshold ability or Ultimate ability, as well as any special attacks. Now there are two versions of this combination. One is stronger but more difficult to obtain, and the other one will be weaker but easier to obtain. The stronger version requires 9 vintage components. This combination with 120 Invention and Extreme Invention Potion will give a 5% chance of getting Relentless 5 plus Crackling 4 in the same gizmo. Vintage component is obtained from disassembling archaeology artifacts. For anyone getting 120 archaeology, this perk combo should be fairly easy to obtain. The second weaker version, rather than Relentless 5 and Crackling 4, will instead go for Relentless 3 with Crackling 4. This weaker version gives you 2 less ranks of Relentless. To get this version, you want to use 4 vintage and 3 explosive components. At level 120 Invention with Extreme Invention Potion, you have a 32% chance to get this perk. You will have around a 10% chance at level 110, but if you do plan to go down this route, I will suggest leveling up your Invention and use your extra vintage components to go for the stronger version rather than try for a 10% chance at a weaker version. The final gizmo that we'll be talking about is one that will contain Biting. Biting is a beast of a perk, as I mentioned in the pre-Ancient Invention section, but it is quite difficult to obtain the components we need. Again, I will list 2 options here. One is harder to obtain but more powerful, the other one is easier to obtain but less powerful. The most powerful version of Biting is Biting 4. To reasonably achieve this perk, you will need Noxious components. 7 Noxious components with 1 direct and 1 blade component give you a 100% chance to get Biting 4. Nox components you get from disassembling Noxious weapons. Now, before you run off and decide that's too difficult, just know that a single Noxious weapon will give you 5 Nox components. If you level the weapon up to level 9 before disassembling, that will give you a total of 20 components for one weapon. This, along with the fact that you can get 100% guaranteed Biting 4, is why I think Biting 4 is worth getting. Now, before I move on to the less powerful version, I just want to mention there are a few different combinations you can make with Biting 4, such as Biting 4 with mobile. By doing these combinations, you are no longer 100% guaranteed to get Biting 4, which means you can potentially waste your Noxious components. Similar to Aftershock, if you're interested in these combinations, let me know down in the comments and I'll make a separate video, but I will not go through these in detail now because a lot of the combinations will not directly affect your damage. Right, on to the less powerful version of Biting. Instead of Biting 4, we can go for Biting 3. Biting 3 can be achieved with just direct components. Direct components can be gotten from battle axes, blunt salvage, and pickaxes, among other things. Generally, you can get quite a lot of these from camping white knight shops. You have the highest chance of getting Biting 3 at level 68 with 9 direct components. Success rate is 4.8%. You should definitely lower your level for this one. Once you are at a higher invention level, it becomes impossible to get Biting without cautious, which turns your auto retaliate off. While this might not seem like a big deal for PVMers, it is a big pain if you ever do Slayer. Before we wrap up, I did mention when discussing Biting 4, the Noxious components are the only reasonable way to achieve Biting 4. The reason why I say reasonable is because you can actually get Biting 4 with this 9 direct component combination, but the chance is 0.05% or 1 in roughly 1,900-ish attempts. So I wouldn't hold my breath going for this method. With that, we are now at the end of this guide. This should hopefully give you an idea which perks to go for as an Ironman looking to do some combat. Some of this stuff around Invention is fairly complicated, so if you have any question or anything in this video that is not clear, please let me know down in the comments below and I will do my best to answer any questions. If you like this video and want more content, please subscribe. Thank you.